Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to the National Brief with me, Henry Bolton. I apologise for being an hour late this evening. Things happen, as we all know. This evening, I want to cover some, again, fairly topical issues. There's the abortion bill that I want to talk about just briefly and share some of my thoughts with you on that. Linked to that is the assisted dying bill, which passed the House of Commons first reading today. And then I want to talk about a couple of other things. Channel crossings, which are close to everybody's heart. And also, it's sort of linked to that in a way, the Iranian sleeper cell threat. And then what's happened or happened last night at RAF Bryce Norton and the, I'm going to call it an attack on two RAF aircraft. So there's quite a lot that's been going on this week. And it's not... this is just a short selection because we've not got all week to discuss them. So, without further ado, I'll crack on. The abortion bill, which was it's not really an abortion bill. It was because I'm trying to sort of explain, sort of wave top explanation of some of these things, and therefore why. Actually, as a sort of philosophical point, when I talk about things, I like to, there's no point in just. This country and our politicians seem to be absolutely in a rut. All they do is really either lie to us, try and spin things to make things sound as though they're doing something about a problem that we're aware of, or that they're trying to play down the problem or ignore it altogether. Then you've got other politicians who come out with big, sexy headlines, very attractive. I'm going to say populistic headlines. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. All these people are to blame for the problems. We're going to do X, Y, and Z, and never actually tell you how. Not in any detail. They say they've got a plan, but don't have a plan. So, and none of this is really explained. So I try to talk. What's happened? Why has it happened? Why is it an issue? Or even why is it not an issue? Although people think it is, and then. What do we need to do, if anything, about it? So I'm just sort of trying to be constructive about these things, and everything I talk about. Yes, a lot of it's based on my opinion, of course it is, but also my experience in the army, the police, diplomacy, politics, and so on. But I don't think it's responsible for politicians just to tell us what we already know without trying to explain them and come up with ideas as to how we solve them. So the abortion bill wasn't actually a bill. It was an amendment that was put in during the debate in the House of Commons on a fairly routine police and crime bill, and so it's been attached to a policing a piece of legislation, and it passed by 379 votes to 137 in the House of Commons. So 379 members of Parliament voted for this amendment. Now, what does it actually mean? Well, first of all, why was this amendment put forward? It was put forward because the people putting this or supporting it feel that there are vulnerable women who have broken the law by voluntarily. That means, in other words, they weren't forced to by a medical situation. So they weren't forced to, so by circumstances or anything else. They voluntarily aborted their pregnancy, and they did so after a 24-week period. Now, this makes it's a criminal act, and so they were prosecuted. They were put before the courts, or they're being put before the courts. So there are things in process. So I think there's 5 actually in the country going through this process at the present time. And the argument is these are vulnerable women, and it's not right to put them through this. Well, that's a valid point. Of course, it's we shouldn't be throwing the law at vulnerable people and people who are feeling particularly unsettled or aren't particularly stable emotionally or psychologically for whatever reason. It might be a temporary thing. It might be another condition, and I understand that. But at the same time, if you have not decided by a full term pregnancy is around 40 weeks. So that's your 9 months. And so if you haven't decided by the 24th week, so over half of that, 6 months into the pregnancy, really, thereabouts, 5 6 months, then you really are you should you not have made that decision beforehand? And if you wait to the last moment, then and you abort your child, as this amendment allows, right up to the point at any time, right up to the point of delivery. If you do that, you've been carrying this child for 9 months. What's such a psychological impact on you? Now, of course, the immediate concern is obviously about the child, and I agree, because I think the women, my own view, women obviously have the right to say what happens to their bodies, and it is generally considered in the medical profession that a fetus can survive outside the womb from around about the 22 to 24 week period. And then that's why, after that, up until now, it's been the law that you can't abort after that 24-week period unless there's a medical emergency or reason to do so. Now we're in the situation, because of this amendment, that in which women can abort their pregnancy at any time. Now, that's voluntary abortion, self-administered, at any time during their pregnancy, right up until just before. There's even a possibility that legally the woman could do it during birth. Now, this, that and they might be full term. I mean, if there are around about 80 to 90% of children born prematurely at the 28-week period survive outside the womb. So they survive 80 to 90% from the 28-week period. So these are absolutely viable children. And we're saying it's okay to I'm going to use the word kill that child at any point after that, after the 24-week period. Now, what do other countries do? Well, I've got them written down here. Italy, Italy and Germany, it is an offence to abort after 12 weeks. That's twice what it was here previously. We had 24 weeks. That's now going up to the full 40 weeks. 40 weeks is what our cut-off period will be, so the full-term pregnancy. In Germany, it's 12 weeks. In Italy, it's 12 weeks. In France, it's 14 weeks. So, that's just three chosen from, if you like, cultures in our own sort of sphere. And I find it reprehensible. I genuinely do. And I also think it opens the way for all sorts of other problems, because I'm not going to talk about mass immigration now, but we all know that we have imported into the United Kingdom people from other cultures. We know that they haven't fully integrated, if at all, many of them. We know that they speak their own language, practice their own religion, and so on and so forth. Now, even putting aside the arguments as to whether that's healthy for society more broadly, here's an issue that is of concern to me. If you go to northwest Pakistan, or you go to southern Afghanistan, for example, Helmand, where the British troops were during the Afghan war, where I was for 27 months, then it is normal practice for men, because they've got no way of finding out the birth of their child before birth, or the sex of their child before birth. Men will frequently murder the newborn daughter. That's because that's their culture, and it's because it's a practical thing as well, in a sense. But in their culture, in their sort of religiously based culture, women can't work. They stay at home, they look after children, they keep the house tidy and so on, but they don't work in the fields, they don't bring in money, they don't bring in the food. And the men do that. So when you have sons, they can contribute to that. When you have daughters, they're seen as a burden. And so often they are killed when it's discovered that they're girls. So what does this do? What is going to happen when people in this country who've come from those cultures realize that actually, a daughter might be a burden? Because even if in this country that girl can go on to have a successful, healthy, vibrant professional life, in their culture, that's not the case. And so culturally, there might be a problem. So we don't know what Pandora's box we're opening by this. But what we can say also is that only about 3% of women in the United Kingdom actually support this. Maximum 3% of women support this. So why on earth are 379, the majority of our members of parliament, voting for this? So we've got a problem with democracy as well. These 379 MPs think that they know better than the women who this legislation is going to impact upon. So, whole range of problems with this. And then if we fast forward, think then about what's happened today, the assisted dying bill. Passed in the House of Commons this afternoon, 314 votes to 291, so a lot closer. The abortion thing was 379 votes to 137. So this afternoon, 314 MPs voted to 291 to pass the assisted dying bill. Well, it's not law yet, not likely to be law until 2029 because it's got to go through other readings in Parliament. So it's going to the House of Lords next. It's unlikely that the House of Lords will block it. So it's probably going to go through the various processes and become law in about 2029, which does give scope for an incoming government to perhaps block it, or it might come in just beforehand, but before it's actually implemented practically, then another government could maybe stop it. But that's down the road. Where we are going with this is that now, if you have been if your prognosis is that you've got less than 6 months to live, you are going to be able to apply to have your an early death, which would be medically assisted, and that would involve a panel that would meet, and the panel would include, again, I couldn't remember off the top of my head. So you're talking about there two doctors, one social worker, a legal professional, a senior legal professional, whatever that means, and a psychiatrist, so that they can assess whether you're in sound mind and so on. Now, there are concerns about this bill. Now, I've known people who have been in this situation, and in fact, their sort of demise has been torturous, and it's a terrible, terrible thing. And so, in principle, in those conditions where you've only got 6 months to live, and to avoid a torturous, painful, slow, miserable death, perhaps this is a good idea. But the problem with this bill is that, I'm not a medical person, but medical people and people working in hospices and end-of-life care type of situations are seriously concerned that this has been rushed through, that a lot of concerns about the safeguarding of this to make sure that it's not abused have been ignored. And the Royal College of Psychiatry has actually said that they are now approaching this with professional trepidation, because they don't think the safeguards are in place, and they don't think there are sufficient numbers of psychiatrists appropriately qualified and experienced to be able to make well-informed decisions and provide advice accordingly. So there are a whole range of problems there, and when you put these two things together, and the legislation that has been passed already by this government that allows doctors in hospitals to attach a "do not resuscitate" label to certain categories of patient. So 3 different pieces of legislation: abortion, taking the point at which you can abort your child, murder your child, really. When you're talking about that late stage, all the way up to that 40-week, 9-month period. You've got the assisted dying bill, which has been rushed through, according to medical professionals, and there are a lot of concerns that have been just swept under the carpet. And you've got the "do not resuscitate" bill. This is dark stuff. It is incredibly dark. And add to that you've got a majority of members of the House of Commons voting for something that a tiny minority of the population support. I mean, it concerns me. And I think, I've got serious concerns about all of this. Morally, where is the Church of England on all this? They've been very, very quiet. Um, what about our moral values? And somebody said to me the other day, well, I did an interview with Jeremy Kyle, and we were talking about people not having moral leadership. Well, I've talked about that for a long time. Moral courage. Moral courage is crucial in leadership, and particularly leadership of a nation. And our MPs are supposed to be leading the nation. But if you haven't got a moral compass in the first place, if you don't know what is right and wrong, if you are pursuing some sort of niche agenda, some niche ideology, in the face of massive public opposition, in terms of opinion, why are you doing it? That's not democracy. And I think you'll all probably, or many of you, will agree that our MPs don't listen, that they are out of touch. And I think this just goes to demonstrate that fact even more than we thought before. So I'm going to leave that there. It's dark, gloomy, and I'm afraid during this brief, I've not got a great deal of good news to talk about, because next I'm going to talk about channel crossings. Well, channel crossings are up. We had 102. I'm sure I live on the south coast, and I'm looking out the window now, and it's gorgeous weather. Has been all day. Just a slight breeze. I'm sure we've had half a division cross today. We had 102 yesterday. We've had 17,380 people cross this year. That is massive, and it's well up on 2022, which was the record year before now. So we'll see what it's going to be by year's end. But we all know this. I mean, I said at the beginning that I'm not keen on politicians, just telling us the blatantly obvious, and and us going away all excited because there's a politician who agrees. We know the problem, and we know it's not changing. Also, you might like to know that last year they were heading for 6,000 people came across on trucks as well. That smuggling route in the back of trucks, people concealed in vehicles, is still carrying on. We don't hear about that. We don't hear about the fact that all of the cocaine, all of the heroin, and around 97% of the firearms used in crime in the United Kingdom are brought across our borders. Our borders are absolutely open. If you come through the correct routes, you will be checked, you will be controlled, you will be all the rest of it. But any other way, it's open. Light aircraft, small boats, and so on. And I'm not just talking about the dinghies. I'm talking. We just don't monitor these things. Gone are the days when port and harbour masters had a statutory obligation to record all vessel movements, record passenger details, and so on, and check that and report any suspicious movement. That's long gone since all the ports and so on were sort of further commercialised and privatised and so on. So we've got a very, very broken, dysfunctional border management and security setup. And that has to change. So massive reform is required there. But, these numbers are continuing to trigger more and more calls for people, for the boats to be turned around. And I'm going to name names. Reform UK, who have done the most incredible job so far in building their sort of presence and their platform and so on, come up with leave the ECHR, deploy the Navy to the Channel, and push the dinghies back to France. Well, that sounds great. It sounds wonderful, but real life doesn't work like that. I've said many times, if you talk me through leaving the. I'm just checking something. Am I? I'm hoping I'm not on mute or anything. Just checking. Because this happened once before, and if so, I'm going to be really quite grumpy. No, we're good. I think. I've said before, including to people in reform at the most senior level, talk me through how leaving the ECHR, which I support, by the way, because it removes a lot of obstacles to the things that we do need to do, but talk me through the steps from leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, to the boats stopping. Because leaving the convention, just pulling out of a piece of legislation, doesn't stop anything. That's not going to happen. You've got to do other things as well. And if you don't know what those things are, then you haven't, despite what you say, oh, we've got a plan, we've got a plan, we've got a plan, then you haven't got a plan. You don't know who's going to do what. You don't know how they're going to do it. You don't know where those resources are going to come from to fund it, to staff it, and all the rest of it. You don't know. You haven't thought through what the second and third order implications are. You can bulldoze your way through, but then you can find that you're actually causing more of a problem in other respects than you're solving. So you've got to plan that. You've got to scope it all out. You've got to think about it. You've got to plan it. And then, only when you've planned it, do you have a plan. If you want to put the Royal Navy in the Channel and push the boats back, well, fine. What, you're going to put 10,500, 12,000 ton warship in the Channel and try and push back a dinghy? Well, there might be those of you who say, well, I don't care if they all drown, then that'll stop them. But you know that nobody's going to actually do that, whether you want them to or whether they don't, whether you don't. You can't push back a dinghy with a warship. And people talk about the Australian model. The Australian the immigrants approaching Australia don't turn up in an inflatable dinghy with 40, 50, 60, 70 people on board. They're in large fishing vessels or commercial vessels. These things can be boarded. These things can be stopped. You can take control of these vessels and you can turn them around. You can't do that with a dinghy. You can't put a boarding party on a dinghy that's already overflowing with people. There are practical problems. And even if you do overcome all of those things and you push these boats back to France and you get these immigrants back to France, these illegal immigrants, then what happens when they get there? They are going to sit there because you can bet your bottom dollar that they are not going to start thinking, oh, well, in that case, that didn't work, did it? I'm going to have to find one of these people smugglers to smuggle me back to Somalia or to Afghanistan or to Syria. You know that's not going to happen. You know they're going to try again. As long as boats get through, there will be people trying to do that. Or as long as we make the United Kingdom attractive. Now, let's just stay with that for a moment, because if you look at the north of France, it is chocker with people. There's thousands of these people. They've all come across Europe and they've come across the Mediterranean or up through the southeast, through the Balkans and so on, Turkey, Greece and so on, and up through. And some of them have come in from Spain, from North and West Africa. And they've come to the North French coast. And they're building up. And they're not going anywhere. These people, as long as the United Kingdom is an attractive destination, will continue to try to cross the Channel in whatever way they can. And criminals will try to make money out of facilitating that. You know it. I know it. The government seems not to know it. The only way that you're going to turn people off from the idea of coming to the United Kingdom is to stop making it attractive. Stop giving them free accommodation. Stop allowing them the freedom to go and work as a delivery driver or as a whatever it might be, or working in a car wash or washing up dishes in a restaurant or whatever it might be. Okay, or drugs running or and trafficking within the UK. All of these things they can do. If you restrict that, then you're restricting the attractiveness. If you stop paying them benefits, then you restrict the attractiveness. But what I advocate, and actually what the Social Democrat Party advocates and has done for a long time now, far longer than Reform, far longer than any other party or any other politician, the Social Democrat Party is arguing, and I'm the spokesman for the Social Democrat Party for Foreign Affairs, Defence and Security. We are arguing that the only way to deal with this is the moment, because if you can't stop these people coming physically necessarily, because they're always, some of them find a way through. Those that find a way through, their feet don't touch the ground. They are detained securely behind wire, and they are moved immediately to somewhere like Ascension Islands, where there is effectively a prison. They are held securely behind wire. Of course, they've got medical facilities and what have you there. Their welfare is secure, But they are held there. They do not stay in the United Kingdom more than a few hours. They do not get hotels. They don't get pizzas. They don't get mobile phones. They don't get new clothing. They don't get any of this stuff. They sit in a prison in the middle of the Atlantic. And they sit there until either we can get rid of them, we can deport them, we can remove them back to wherever, or they ask to go back to whence they came. If you make no exceptions to that, there's an issue over children. It complicates things. That needs to be dealt with in a similar way, because the children are being sent over there as a drag, as a cause, if you like, to get other people in. But if you were to do that with no exceptions, then nobody would cross, and they could see it happening, and they could see there were no exceptions, and you could see this policy was being implemented robustly, then people would not come across anymore. And that's what we've got to try and reach. To do that, yes, we have to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. Of course we do, because we have to remove the legal obstacles to doing that. But we have to exercise our sovereignty. And as I keep saying, a government that does not exercise sovereignty on its borders is a government that is not governing. It is a government that is surrendering its sovereignty. If you can't secure your own borders, you can't secure your homeland. And if you're not securing your homeland out of choice or out of political or other cowardice, then you are not fit to govern the people you are supposed to be securing. So that's where I stand on this. But then moving on, we've got an interesting situation where, of course, there's the conflict in Iran. The Israelis bombing the bejesus out of the Iranians to stop their nuclear program. So let's talk about that now. Iran was within weeks, maybe only a week or two, of being able to create a nuclear weapon. This is a country that has repeatedly stated its intention to destroy, to annihilate, to wipe from the face of the earth the state of Israel. It is a country that has destabilized the entire Middle East for many years, ever since the Iranian Revolution in 1979. It is a country that has funded the Houthis down in the bottom of the Arabian Peninsula, Hamas in Palestine, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the West Bank and so on, but particularly Lebanon. And those people have attacked international shipping. They have been attacking Israel. Iran has created so much death, so much suffering, that it's just incomprehensible. And this is a country that was on the cusp of acquiring a nuclear weapon. So, was Israel right or wrong? I'll leave it to you to decide. But slight rabbit hole. I was asked by a congressional commission, United States Congressional Commission, to look at, scope, and then provide recommendations to them for securing the borders of the United States against the trafficking of weapons of mass destruction by terrorists. And I provided 13 recommendations, all of which were adopted by Congress and by the White House. So this is a subject I know, and Iran has a lot of radioactive material. Could quite easily create a radioactive or dirty bombs, which aren't the same as a nuclear weapon, but they create radiation which needs to be cleared up. So it doesn't create devastation, doesn't create the same level of radiological threat to human beings, but still a threat, and it needs to be tidied up. So it can, if you set one off, for example, in the port of Rotterdam, it could be immensely damaging to the European economies that through which most of the goods would flow and so on. So there are various things that could be done short of an actual nuclear bomb, nuclear weapon. But anyway, if Iran got their hands on a nuclear weapon, we just don't know the likelihood of them using it. But their rhetoric suggests they'd be highly likely to use it against Israel. So it's up to you whether you think that Israel is acting in self-defense or otherwise. But then there's the problem, of it expanding. Are the United States going to get involved? We can't say yes or no. President Trump is obviously very clearly reluctant to get involved. The United States involvement would probably be, I think, in two areas. If it happens, perhaps three areas, but certainly two. One is that they have a bomb that they're the only country that possesses it that can go hundreds of feet underground before detonating, and it is the only weapon that is likely to get to one of the Iran's nuclear processing facilities. It's probably the crucial facility for producing a nuclear weapon. So the Israelis have destroyed a whole swathe of nuclear facilities in Iran and killed a number of scientists who were involved in that program. But there is still potentially the ability of Iran to produce still a nuclear weapon, although that has probably been delayed and so on and so forth. Now, will the Americans get in there and do the final bit? We don't know the answer. If they do, you can bet that the proxy allies of Iran, the Houthis, Hamas, and so on, Hezbollah, will use their means, what means they've got, to attack shipping in the Gulf, to attack American bases in the Middle East, probably British bases as well. A lot of those bases have been evacuated. Where there are aircraft and ships, they've been dispersed. So they're not ships aren't sitting sort of next to the port in Bahrain where there were British and European and American and Canadian warships. They've all been dispersed. They're all out at sea in order to protect them in case of an Iranian strike or a strike by somebody else, terrorist or otherwise. So they've taken precautions there in case this would happen. But my point here is that the Americans may do this in order to finalize the job. But if they do, those proxies are going to kick off, and the Iranians may as well. So how do you deal with that? Do you wait for it to happen, or do you preemptively strike the Houthis, Hamas, or maybe Hamas, although they're not quite so involved, they're tied up and badly degraded in Gaza, and Hezbollah? Do you do that? In which case you could see both the strike on the nuclear facility from the Americans and a massive, ideally quick, but massive effort to totally destroy, particularly the Houthis. We'll see. Do we get involved as the Brits? Probably. We've moved aircraft down to Cyprus. The Americans have moved a huge amount of hardware, air power, into the region. The Queen Elizabeth aircraft carrier has just transited 2 days ago the Suez Canal. So there's a lot of hardware down there. So let's see what happens. But the reason I'm talking about this, because again, all know about it, but it feeds in to something that has emerged today. And that is that Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, has apparently warned President Trump that should America strike in the way that we've talked about, strike Iran, then it is likely that Iranian sleeper cells in Europe and the United Kingdom will conduct terror attacks. That begs the question, Prime Minister, if you know that there are Iranian sleeper cells in the United Kingdom, what are you doing about it? How did they get here? Did they come across on small boats? How did they get here? This hasn't been, I don't think, yet made, and maybe it won't. But this needs to make massive, great waves across the media. The Prime Minister has admitted to the American president that the United Kingdom is now under threat, and Europe, from Iranian sleeper cells who may carry out terrorist attacks here. How the bloody hell did that happen, Prime Minister? This goes back to your inability, and indeed the Conservative government's inability, refusal even, to secure our borders. And if we know they're here, what the hell are we doing about it? Because it needs to be dealt with. But instead of dealing with it, Prime Minister, what you've chosen to do is try and exercise the influence they want you to exercise, these terrorists, by trying to hold back military action by the United States. Military action, as I say, which might be crucial, might be the final step in making sure that Iran doesn't get the bomb and doesn't nuke Israel. And you are asking him to hold back because you, this government, the Conservative government before that, and the Labour government before that, and the Labour Lib Dem coalition, Conservative Lib Dem coalition, all for years, we have opened our borders. And this is why now these people whose presence is purely designed to influence your decision making is influencing that decision making. You are allowing terrorists to influence your foreign and security policy. And that, Prime Minister, is not leadership. That is not leadership. I know what leadership looks like, and you certainly don't represent it. That's the wrong response to this threat. See, I feel passionately about that one. So we've now got a Prime Minister who says that there are Iranian terrorist sleeper cells in Europe and the United Kingdom. And then today, what happened, or last night, what happens? RAF Bryce Norton in Oxfordshire, the home of, well, it's the biggest RAF base in Britain. It's mainly transport aircraft, but it's home also to something called the Voyager aircraft. The Voyager aircraft is a big old bus of an airliner, basically, which is converted. It can carry passengers, it can carry cargo, but it also is our air-to-air refueling aircraft. Big old, think of an airliner, a large airliner, painted grey and with our RAF roundels on it. So that's what we're looking at. And last night, the Palestinian Action Group penetrated security at RAF Bryce Norton on e-bikes and approached two of these Voyager aircraft, and sprayed them with red paint. Now, it seems that they can't be used at the moment as a result. So is the damage, isn't there, or is it just simply that the RAF wants to redo the paint before they use them? I don't know. But this is our biggest military or air base, the RAF air base in Britain. It is crucial to the operations that we conduct anywhere in the world. And these aircraft are crucial to those operations because if you want to move fighters, for example, to Cyprus, Typhoon fighters or F-35s, you need to refuel them. And you need these aircraft to refuel them. And you will have seen perhaps the Ukrainian strike on the Russian bombers. Imagine that we are living in a very unsafe world. We've got Russia, we've got Iran, we've got jihadists. And if a couple of people on e-scooters or e-bikes can penetrate the security of RAF Bryce Norton, approach two massive aircraft, and spray them with paint, undetected, thank God they weren't equipped with bombs or even Molotov cocktails, because they would have caused millions of pounds of damage and possibly put two aircraft permanently out of use, destroyed them, and would have caused immense embarrassment to the RAF and the British government. Now, you can connect these together. We're talking about the Channel boat crossings. Record numbers, 17,380 this year. You can talk about these Iranian sleeper cells that are operated or are here in the United Kingdom, according to the Prime Minister. And now you've got this. What the hell is going on? You know, back in the day when I was in the military, I was in Germany, used to do sentry duty and so on. If you saw somebody who wasn't supposed to be there, you challenged them 3 times in English and German. Halt or I shoot, or halt oder ich schieße. Okay, that's schieße. And you repeated that warning 3 times. If they didn't, you shot them. Now, what is going on in these RAF bases? We've outsourced so much of our security to private security companies and so on. I don't know. I don't know what the security layout is in RAF Bryce Norton, but in this threat environment, with the Russians, with the Iranians, with the Palestinians, with jihadists, we're just mad people, and we failed to secure RAF Bryce Norton and 2 massive aircraft sitting on the pans at RAF Bryce Norton. These 3 things. I mean, I talked about 3 things. You've got the assisted dying bill, you've got the abortion amendment, you've got the do not resuscitate legislation. 3 things that really create a rather dark element to the government's politics, the ruling party, the Labour Party. And now you've got this. You've got the boats, record numbers coming across. You've got the Iranian sleeper cells, and you've got an attack by a Palestinian group, Palestinian supporters. I don't know who these people actually themselves were, but a Palestinian support group penetrating RAF Bryce Norton and attacking 2 of our aircraft. This needs to change. This government is not. There is nothing about any of this that is securing the British people and keeping them safe from harm. And that is a damning indictment on this government and the leadership that it's exercising, the lack of leadership. This country is suffering a vacuum of leadership, and there is none. There's no moral compass. Therefore, there's no moral courage. There's no moral leadership. There's no moral example. There's no putting the interests of the United Kingdom and the British people before everything else. And I know, and this is, I'm being apolitical about this, but because I want the best for the country. But I know we're all absolutely hacked off with the Labour Party. Many of us warned that this is what it would be like, and it's going to still get worse. That's a conversation for another time. It is going to get worse. We're all bitterly disappointed in the Conservatives and rightly don't think that they deserve our vote until they convince us that they've changed. So we don't want to vote for Labour. We don't want to vote for Conservatives. What other option is there? Well, there's Nigel Farage and Reform. Well, again, where is the plan? What it actually, apart from razzmatazz and all the rest of it, and the personality and the amazing communication skills of Nigel Farage, what actually is Reform offering concretely? We'll stop the boats. Well, the Conservatives said that. Labour said that. Reform said it. But there is still no plan from Reform. How's Reform going to deal with defence? How's Reform going to deal with the foreign affairs things? You never hear a squeak out of them with regards foreign affairs. And foreign affairs directly impact on our own security, as I've just illustrated. So I really don't think the country has leadership. What it has is 3 major parties. Reform is obviously a major party now. 3 major parties, all of whom tell you they're going to do something, all of whom disappoint. Reform don't have a plan, so are likely to disappoint. And none of that takes the country forward. None of it. Because there is no leadership that puts the country first. All the leaders we have put themselves first, their egos, their own ambition, their own parties, their own ideology, or things of that ilk. They are not putting the interests of the United Kingdom and the British people first. And as long as they don't do that, as long as they're not altruistic in that sense, as long as they put something in front of you and I and the rest of the people living here, then we don't have leadership. As I say, I know what leadership looks like, and this isn't it. So, rather depressing note to end on. But anyway, hope that triggered some thought, triggered some ideas. Please send me a message on, DM me on X or comment on YouTube, because this is also going out on YouTube. And I will do my best to probably weave those comments in, because what I'd like to do is, because this is only the 3rd episode, and please do subscribe to the YouTube channel, Henry Bolton OBE, and if you're not already, follow me on X. And what I want to do is, in future, as we get to that point, as I said in the 3rd episode, I'll just introduce the program, what we're going to talk about. Then I want to cover, I want to address some of your comments that come in. So if you've sent me comments in the previous few days that I think are relevant to the conversation, then I will I'll address them, and then we'll go and talk about the main part of the content of the National Brief. So, well, thank you very much, and see you again this time. No, 7 o'clock next Friday. 7 o'clock every Friday. Thank you very much. Take care. Have a good weekend. Bye.